When I started playing through all the Souls games, there was one that I heard was going to be an absolute miserable experience. Dark Souls 2 is easily the most divisive Souls game, with some very loyal fans, but a very strong reputation for just being bad. All the noise surrounding the game makes it seem like the absolute worst experience for someone playing through FromSoft's game library for the first time. And while this had me admittedly concerned for my own sanity going into it, I can now answer the question of, is Dark Souls 2 really that bad, or is there still some fun to be had with it? I feel like there are some very real gripes that people have with this game, and I had as well, but the hate feels a little overblown. Do I think it's the best Souls game? No. But did I still have fun with it and a really good time despite its struggles? Yeah. Let's get this out of the way. Dark Souls 2 has quite a few things to complain about. Just a few of the things I found to rant about would be, having your dodge iframes tied to a stat you need to level is really rough, especially early on in the game, and I'm glad that they only ever did it in this one game. The fact you lose max health when you die and then have to use a kinda rare-ish item to regain a full health bar is not something I personally enjoyed but wasn't too difficult to overcome. Some hitboxes are completely busted, most notably for me was the Mimics and Suralone's sword. Sometimes you just swing in weird directions and take damage because of it. Big weapons break super easy. Your health regen is pretty slow and you really need to adapt to it. And of course, some of these runbacks are just brutal. Especially Suralone, Smelter Demon, Executioner Chariot, and the Frigid Outskirts where Santa stuffs all the naughty kids. With that out of the way, I will say there are plenty of things to enjoy, and some of the flaws don't bother me nearly as much as others. There are tons of other videos going more in depth about the faults of Dark Souls 2, but I, a New York Jets fan, know I'll experience a mediocre product, so I have to look at the good things coming through every once in a while. With that said, I do want to go more in depth about the runbacks because I feel like it gets to the heart of what Dark Souls 2 was trying to accomplish and why it's so divisive. The main reason some runbacks feel terrible is the fact that this game was designed to go at the speed of an old man driving and not prime Max Verstappen zooming to a boss room. Dark Souls 2 is easily the slowest feeling Souls game that I've played so far. Part of this is just due to the pace that you have to have exploring the world. Every area has tons of enemies littered throughout the whole world that make a Tokyo subway feel empty. With the fact that your health regenerates slowly from both flasks and life gems, instead of right away like in every other FromSoft game, basically says, alright kid, you can either go fight the Horde or get cut down from the back, which is an undead's greatest shame. Now personally, I'm a simple man. I see bad guy in way, bad guy getting detoured to 6 feet under. This is how Dark Souls 2 is meant to be played, slowly and methodically clearing out every enemy in front of you until you get to the boss. This is even more evident to me by the fact that you can get hit out of the fog wall, which is definitely a choice, and having to, say, slowly clear out what feels like 30 enemies on the way to base game Smelter Demon feels like a chore, and can tilt you even more after you just choke the boss and a random schmuck knocks you into the lava. But this game is very clear. Every enemy, much like women, boundaries, and the pouch, deserves respect. With that said, there are some genuinely horrendous runbacks such as Dark Lurker and the Frigid Outskirts, also known colloquially as Hell Frozen Over, which are so genuinely bad I have no qualms with anyone who values their sanity over fighting those bosses. Alright, enough about the aspects of the game that are widely disliked, let's talk about some of the things that I really liked about the game. Majula is by far the best hub area in any of the Souls games I played, which as of writing this excludes Sekiro and Demon Souls. Coming out of the tutorial cave to see the sun and the city overlooking the ocean with the chime of the soundtrack ringing into the air was absolutely peak. Seeing how Majula felt like a real growing city that shows the impact of your travels after you meet an NPC or find a key to unlock more of the city was really strong for me. And while I wasn't a big fan of constantly having to go back to level up just because it kinda disrupts the flow of exploring, getting to come back to home and upgrade whatever you need and grab some more life gems was a nice break from some of the more difficult portions of the journey. The overall sense of aesthetic in this game is also really well done. Dark Souls 2 has a reputation for peak fashion Souls, and some of the armor sets that I came across looked really cool. I've also seen some people with great looking fashion sets online. I didn't really contribute to any of that, cause Jester armor funny and practical since no one can backshot a clown, which is just common knowledge. The environments are also really well done and very unique feeling from an artistic standpoint. I already went over the gorgeous view of Majula, the overgrown woods seen in multiple areas including the Forest of Giants and the Shaded Woods, helps the world feel more aged. The Hyde's Tower and the Lost Bastille is kind of two sides of the same coin in terms of areas overlooking water, was really cool. I thought the gutter was a way better and more unique looking way of handling descending into a dark cave than basically anything else I had seen in Souls games. The spider domain leading up to Freja genuinely had me on edge since my grandma traumatized me by making me watch Arachnophobia as a kid. The Shrine of Amana looked fantastic despite being an absolute hellscape to explore. Drangleic Castle's dark, oppressive aura stood as a stark contrast to the colors that we had previously seen in other areas. And they even managed to do the unthinkable. They made Earthen Peak, a poison area in a Souls game, feel unique and not just like generic Poison Swamp 4. This is without mentioning anything about the DLC, which, in my opinion, had the 3 most visually stunning areas in the entire game. Another big positive for me, and I genuinely don't know how many other people feel the same about this, is the use of the torch in a couple of areas. This made me really enjoy my time more of Pirate Island and the Gutter. Personally, going through these dark areas and slowly lighting a trail to show me where I have and haven't explored was really satisfying and a much better system than just having a lantern item on your hip, or the headlight from Dark Souls 1. It really did immerse me more into the adventure of these 2 areas, especially the vertically dangerous terrain of the Gutter. This is one of my favorite locations, as it really got me invested into bringing fire to everything, even the weird dog in the corner. I also really enjoyed that it had combat effects on some enemies. You have some of the big dudes in the pirate area that get scared off by fire. As a certified spider hater, it brought me great joy to see them cower before the strength of fire, just as it should be. This made not just exploring her area, but fighting Freya way more manageable, which felt really rewarding to me. And I know you can't have your shield out while you're lighting up the world like nobody else, but you can always go back a little to relight at a previously lit beacon if you run into trouble and really need to protect yourself. Also, I'm genuinely anxious about wasting items, but I had like 3 hours left on this torch, so I never felt any anxiety regarding wasting the life of the torch, unlike my real life. The world design is a step down from Dark Souls 1, but I mean, it's hard to top a world and level design that good. The individual levels still feel fun to go through, with a lot of secret paths, but the world is definitely not as connected, so you often go back to Majula and then down the next path. I actually didn't mind this approach, but since it's a definite step down for some people, I can see why they'd be disappointed. Having all the paths to get to the 4 primal bonfires available pretty early on after grabbing like 2 branches makes your journey feel a bit more unique since you can go wherever you want. After finishing the tutorial area that was the Forest of Giants, which had 2 really good bosses for learning the ropes of the game, aka just dump stats into adaptability so you can actually dodge some of their attacks, I skipped Hyde's Tower and went straight to the Lost Bastille, before eventually going back to clear it out after beating the Lost Sinner and joining the Rat Gang down in the 300 hole in Majula. Not every location was perfect, but I don't hold Izalith against Dark Souls 1, so I'm not going to hold the Shrine of Amana against Dark Souls 2. Exploring overall still felt worthwhile to look around. Finding that little off the beaten path area often led me to good loot, a bonfire, or a fun NPC encounter. If you watch the video about my thoughts on Dark Souls 1 and Elden Ring, you know I don't care much about story, especially in Souls games. Vaati and the rest of the lore tubers are going to make this shit actually digestible for me and my Unga Bunga having head ass. That being said, I did like the story about the cycle and how maybe just throwing ourselves into the fire because the cool kids said you should isn't a very smart idea. The NPC stories were also really nice, with Lucitil and Vendrick being the big standouts for me. Although massive shoutouts to some other memorable characters such as the cat you can pet, I got boss weapons Crow, and the goat, Gavlin Wheel, Gavlin Deal. A few other thoughts I had on the base gameplay. I really like that new game is super rewarding for players that had the Stockholm Syndrome fully set in to keep going with this game. It's cool to hear about how the world is still somewhat connected to Dark Souls 1 even though everything else is so different, especially through the Lord Souls existing near the poor primal bonfires. The chaos bug possessing the Lost Sinner also fits here since it's a physical thing that we've seen in both Dark Souls 1 and now Dark Souls 2. The new game also having bosses in different areas for a bit before returning to their lair adds a level to the bosses that just enhances them in my opinion, with Freya being the one I heard about. I was also told that the item that you use to upgrade your flask's healing power is the remains of your character from the first game, which, hey, I don't really know if that's true. But if it is, that really enhances the world for me. The PvP community still is pretty active, and while I'm not a big PvP enjoyer, some people in my Twitch chat were still active, and were nice enough to let me get close to winning in a duel. Thanks guys, your check's in the mail. Last main thought here, but the bonfire esketit was an item I found very interesting. The idea of farming up bosses to help level up or to grab other weapons is a genuinely brilliant idea, and I hope that From lets that guy cook again, because he made, in all honesty, a Michelin award-winning item right there. I only used the item once, and it wasn't even for really a cool new game item. I accidentally killed Fume Knight too fast, and I was peer pressured by my chat into getting my ass kicked in the new game version for about 2 hours, until I mastered the fight, which, if I'm being honest, is how I wanted this encounter to go anyways. Speaking of the bosses, Dark Souls 2 has a lot of them, totaling 41 if you include the DLC bosses. While this number seems huge for not open world Souls games, it comes with the caveat that the saying about quantity versus quality is right, as there's kind of a wide spectrum of quality with these bosses. You got some great bosses, I'm talking Burnt Ivory King, Velstadt, Fume Knight, Smelter Demon, Dark Lurker, and Looking Glass Knight, just name a few. And then there's funny bosses like the Rat Gang, Multiplying Skeletons, and... is that just Medusa? Quite a few bosses are either barely bosses, just not an interesting or fun fight. For instance, we have such great bosses as Wild Dog that might have rabies in his boys, Great Value Jabba the Hutt, the one sober guy hanging out with his drunk friends, and of course, the icon, Frog that got the saying wrong and has a human in his throat. Some bosses are also just way more frustrating than fun to fight. The standouts in that regard are Ancient Dragon, which was way too long of a fight, and the Gargoyles, who return with way more homies than Dark Souls 1, which makes the fight way less enjoyable. Overall, I'd say the quality is very much that of peaks and valleys, with the highs being very high and the lows being really down there. And there's not that much in between, low-key. But the peaks of the boss design here can easily stand amongst the best in the series. The overall crown jewel for me was Burnt Ivory King. Dropping into the Chaos Bed to start the fight was so cool and got me genuinely so excited with that tie into the world. I really liked how you can make the fight as difficult as you want by choosing if you want to explore and grab more homies, or live the male fantasy of soloing an army. The king having very good speed and range to apply pressure without it feeling like an unending wave of attacks needing you to spam to dodge also just makes it a very rewarding and fun fight to learn. Since we're already on the topic, let's talk a little bit more about the DLC, because I genuinely feel that they were amongst the best parts of this game. The DLC areas really stood out to me for their phenomenal design, feeling like they each had a little bit of those Dark Souls 1 levels of connectedness that really made exploring every corner feel worthwhile. Broom Tower, Shulva, and the Frozen Alien Lois each had their own unique feeling that really immersed you in the specific environment and the task at hand to crack the world open. The Lost City approach in Shulva felt like a From take on an Indiana Jones area, which I think is the only time they've really done the sunken city kind of shtick. Broom Tower just felt like a better version of the Iron Keep and a more fleshed out fire area with a focus on combat and strategizing for the totem things. And then the Ice Castle was a fun experience of being like the French in storming a castle to take down a corrupted king. I personally also didn't have that much of a problem with the actual bosses that were clearly designed for co-op, as I thought it was a fun challenge for myself near the end of my journey. It's cool they wanted to get people to play together and explore certain optional areas of the DLC with friends, but solo these runbacks are not very fun. I genuinely don't think there was a bad boss fight of the 9 total across the DLC, but I can understand why people don't want to fight like the Gank Boys. The main bosses for each area in particular though stand out for how unique they are from everything else that the game had to offer. Surlone's quickness and great range, Fume Knight's aggression with the big sword wielder, especially for the time, was very unique. Sin being the only poison dragon I can think of is actually a pretty fun and unique dragon fight. And I mean, I already talked about my goat, the Burnt Ivory King. Dark Souls 2 left me with quite a lot to like, from some great and beautiful areas to explore, to some cool new game mechanics that I kinda hope come back, not you ADP, you can stay in the corner, to some standout boss encounters. I know the game isn't perfect, but it was still a lot of fun for me to play. There are certainly some faults and blemishes in the game, but hey, we all have that. I also don't feel like this game is as bad as people say. Like, kind of the whole shtick was, oh, Dark Souls 2 bad, but I feel like that was just a narrative bought into when the game came out, and it's kind of just stuck with its sense. I feel like the hate stems from the fact that the start of the game is rougher than normal for any Souls game. The game does improve as you start to adapt more to the slower play style and actually have enough adaptability to, dodge attacks and heal in a timely manner. But those are my thoughts on Dark Souls 2. Let me know if you guys agree with me, if I make some good points, or if I'm just an idiot and a psychopath. That's very on brand for me. If you guys want to, leave a comment, talk about Dark Souls 2, how you guys like it, or if you don't. Keep it civil down there, though, because I know some people will get very passionate about this. Outside of that, I'm planning to make more videos. Sub if you want to. I don't care. The only thing you gotta do is be safe. Have a good rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.